Welcome to Hip Hop Now Podcast. If you're from the future, you know what to do. Get your ass out of here. Don't disrespect the legend. Hip Hop is here to stay. Let's get right into the business.
What up, y'all? I am your host, Vegas, and this is Hip Hop Now Podcast, a podcast designed to keep you caught up on all things hip-hop, music, and culture that happen throughout the week. This podcast is brought to you by the producers over at patreon.com/hiphopnow. If you would like to learn about what it is to be a producer and what you get, because there's some stuff on the way exclusively, visit patreon.com/hiphopnow. But more importantly, if I said it too quick, you're like, hold on, I still use a pen. I got to write it down. The link is in the description of this episode. You're welcome. Also know, I have logo items, merch, hoodies, t-shirts, stickers, all kinds of things over at Vegas World Inc. on tpublic.com. That's all you got to search for to get to it. But also the link to merch is in the description of this episode for those of you who live on the East Coast, where one day is spring, the next day is winter. Get a t-shirt and a hoodie. Frequently they have sales, so I would say wait till you see it's about like 30% off, then hop on it. I don't pay my mortgage with it. It supports the podcast. I put the money back into promoting the podcast, so it's all good. All the support is welcome, and people could walk around and say, who's that? You know, and even when they walk around, they look at me like, who's that? His hair is different, but I think it's kind of him, but he kind of thicker than what the, you know what I mean. So it is what it is, fam. Big shout out to hiphopdx.com, allhiphop.com, and Brochure for Heads, and a couple of places where I'm getting some of these stories from. Now, we must start out on a very, very, very sad note, not only during a year where we celebrate 50 years of hip hop, but just in general, considering the circumstances. Trugoy the Dove, aka Dave of De La Soul, passed away this past week. I'm not sure what he passed away from. Honestly, I don't even think it's that important at this point. When you lose somebody like that, I think he was around 54 years of age, early 50s, basically. And it's a sad moment for hip hop. Just a little backstory: De La Soul, for me as a fan, was one of the first groups I fell in love with in hip hop. You know, they were new, they were different with the whole Daisy Age thing, and the way, like, you know, Trugoy's Gumby was cut, like it was a Gumby with like twists or locks. It was dope for the time, you know. And I just remember songs like Me, Myself, and I that, you know, in the beginning was so dope to me. And around that time where De La Soul dropped in the 80s or late 80s, I know for me personally, I didn't have money to buy music like that. So my brother, being a DJ, he had the album, made me a copy. And when I tell you I listened to 3 Feet High and Rising like forever, you know, it's one of my favorite De La Soul albums of all time. In a lot of ways, also with the skits being a thing on albums. Nobody did skits to that extent back then. You know, not saying that skits didn't exist, but it really was a thing and became a thing, definitely in the 90s in general. And, you know, it's a sad loss as a MC in particular, because well documented on this podcast, De La Soul was battling with Tommy Boy Records for the rights to their music, and more importantly, the rights to stream their music. So for years, that now that we've had these streaming services, you couldn't go on there if you didn't have the albums. You couldn't go on there and say, hey, I want to listen to De La Soul's whole catalog, or I want to make a playlist out of De La Soul albums on Apple or Tidal or Spotify. And, you know, it was just this big controversy. And we learned not that long ago that De La Soul's catalog was coming to streaming services. They own the rights to it. It's a big blowout that was planned, which is taking effect now, to release all of this music. And so it was going to be like this, and it's still going to be that, but this celebration of De La Soul and their music, especially from the past, like 3 Feet High and Rising, and De La Soul is Dead, and Balloon Mind State, Stakes is High, all of their albums. And when you think about De La Soul's discography, one, it's incredibly slept on, right? Because there are De La fans, and then there are people who only know Tribe, right? Forgot about De La Soul. Definitely don't listen to their new stuff. Then maybe there's new fans also, right? I know De La Soul when they became independent and they released their own music. So in a lot of ways, a very, very slept on, well, let me not say slept on, maybe underrated group in hip hop history, given the impact that they had on the hip hop game and the fact that they were still current. I personally, maybe 4 years ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, was able to see De La Soul perform live for the first time ever. I'm not a dude that goes to a bunch of shows just to get my passport stamped as a hip hop fan. I've been to plenty of shows over time because they were parties and I like to party. But I'm a hip hop head, so if I'm at a party and De La Soul's performing or whoever, but this wasn't a party. This was actually a festival down in Maryland, and De La Soul was performing, and I was like, wow, this is going to be kind of dope. Summertime is outside. People, a little doing some of that. For people listening, I'm gesturing to smoking marijuana. That's what I'm doing. But you know what I'm saying? It was a dope experience because they did a lot of their new music, and it's just an older crowd, so some of them didn't know what it was. But man, when they went to their classics, you forget the string of hits they had, because this entire place or lawn and whatever else that was there, all of a sudden everybody was locked in as soon as they started performing their hits. So again, it's always great to give people their flowers while they're still here, to celebrate them while they're still here. But sometimes, you miss that opportunity. One of the things I did with having a podcast called That Time in Hip Hop was to give people their flowers, whether they were here or not. I don't believe we ever did an episode specifically on De La Soul, but I think it warrants it given their history in the game. So we'll see. Stay tuned for that. But nevertheless, man, I just wanted to show my gratitude towards Trugoy the Dove, Dave of De La Soul, and a major impact he had on me as a young hip hop fan, as a eventual MC, just an inspiration overall in creativity and artistry. Because a lot of, not to throw shade at any other, rappers, and some of which we're going to talk about pretty soon, there's a thing about art that has stood the test of time versus a product. And what De La Soul has always done is represent themselves, how they felt. They never conformed. Even when Stakes is High was out, and I wasn't feeling the Biggie slander, okay? When you said you're tired of Versace shades, I felt some kind of way. I'm being honest. But they didn't take away my love for De La Soul. You know what I'm saying? It didn't take it away at all. So, again, more to come on that. But first and foremost, I just want to say rest in peace and condolences to the family of Dave, a.k.a. Trugoy, the Dove of De La Soul. He will be missed. But when De La Soul's music drops, buy it, right? Buy it. Not just because he passed away. I would have told you that anyway. Buy it. Because if there's one thing about myself that I could use an example for you as a hip hop head, it didn't matter that their music wasn't on streaming services for my listening pleasure, because I already have what I need from De La Soul. I already own their albums. So, again, buy it. It's available. Buy digitally, find the CD, buy the vinyl, whatever it may be. Support those brothers because they are hip hop history, and we're celebrating 50 years of hip hop. And De La Soul, without a doubt, has had an impression on the hip hop game. Rest in peace. Now, let's get right into the business. Remy Ma calls drill rap overrated. Now, this is coming from what she sees as a disparity in pay, which we could talk about. But to call it overrated is a discussion. Let's see what she had to say. Shout out to hiphopdx.com. You can check out this article by Mackenzie Cummins Grady, posted February 17th. If you're from the future and it's June, or you know what to do, get your ass out of here. You already know what happened, okay? But I'm going to read a little bit from it. Remy Ma has called drill rap overrated and said many of subgenres' new artists aren't getting paid the way they deserve to. Oosh. Now, the Bronx bred rapper made the comments in a new interview on the Jason Lee show, adding that she doesn't really understand the appeal of the budding new sound of hip hop. Here's a quote from her. I don't have an exact person, but I feel like a lot of drill is overrated. Like, I don't know what you're saying, but that's all anybody listens to. It's not an artist thing. It's a sound, and I feel like the whole genre is super overrated. I'm not going to read the whole article. Let me just read a little bit more. She continued, people are literally out here killing their children. These artists, they're 14, they're 15, 16, they're killing each other. And I feel like it's because of the way people are acting. Like it's this whole big thing, but I don't really think any of them is getting the money that they should off their YouTube views or off of their music, and it's overrated. They're dying over it. Now, this is not what I thought it was going to be. Remember, Hip Hop Now podcast, news stories, mostly me reacting in real time. That's not exactly what I thought she meant, which makes this even more interesting. So let's just deal with it being overrated. I tend to agree. Now, do I dislike drill music? Not necessarily. I think Pop Smoke opened that door for me to like some of it. But I could tell you right now, it is 1,000% the production. It's the dark production. And with Pop Smoke in particular, he kind of had a really deep, dark voice. So it almost didn't matter what he said, right? You know, I mean, it matters what he says, but it almost didn't matter because it was more about how we say it, young kids, a vibe, right? Not something I listen to all the time. Unfortunately, maybe I'm getting inebriated and that's when I want to listen to it, which is a good or a bad thing. But nevertheless, as a part of the culture, as a part of art, it's not really art, right? It is a subgenre of hip hop, a branch on the tree that is hip hop, but it's a branch on the tree of hip hop, just like boom bap is, right? Or funk laced hip hop. But it is overrated because there is nothing about one particular artist, one particular song that is unique enough, or enough artists who are unique from each other, right? That's what unique means. But I just kind of find like, well, what's the difference? I think Pop Smoke's voice for me gave me oh, okay, I get it, right? But then the next person who I listen to, like Fabio Foreign, like, you know, when he makes a drill record, I don't necessarily like it because I don't really think he's that good. And he doesn't have the voice and the presence that Pop Smoke had for me. So I think as a art form or subgenre of hip hop musically, it is well overrated. It's a fad for sure. It won't be here much longer. Save your pennies. Speaking of saving your pennies, I think when she talks about them, the artists, not getting paid what they should off of YouTube views, or just in general for the popularity of drill rap and them putting their lives on the line, because she ain't lying about that. I done been down that YouTube rabbit hole of beefs and drill rap and who killed who and who's smoking on what pack and all of that bars. But I kind of look at it like it's a shame, because again, it's a music industry issue that's always been there. It's always taken advantage of poverty, right? In some cases, talented people, talented kids, artists, producers, writers, whoever they are, who don't come into this music industry game with the knowledge, even though we live in a time where there are so many examples of how the music, a record label or whatever organization or entity could take advantage of a person who's just ignorant to the business, right? And a lot of kids on YouTube blow up. And they, in some cases, the smart ones monetize, but then they don't know the levels of monetization. They don't know what they deserve. They don't know that if they have this many streams or views, they should be probably sitting down with YouTube to negotiate something before they put anything else on their site. There's a couple of tech bloggers who do that, who know that, right? Who know, like, if I leave your site, 20 million subscribers are coming with me over there, right? So they know how to negotiate their situation. So they deal with YouTube on a different level than me going and monetizing videos like this. And it's just the truth. Now, with these kids, unfortunately, a couple $1,000s is a lot of bread, right? You could be the man in your school because you got 10,000 views on your song, right? Imagine if you get millions of views on your song and your video that you just took an iPhone and just went and shot it, right? And you got 30 million views. Most of those people tend to blow up, right? They tend to get real deals and get even more money, Glorilla, right? Some people know the game, but what Remy Ma's speaking to is the artists, because they're going out here trying to blow this thing up, make a lot of money, but in a lot of ways, they're making someone else a lot of money. And they wind up dead, 14, 15, 16 years old, dead. That money is in a chain that probably pays for the funeral because the family doesn't really have money, right? It's not wealth. It's rich for the moment. So I agree with her, right? As a genre, it's clearly overrated. Fans of it may love it, but it's niche, right? And it's dangerous. And it's not even worth it as an investment after a while, because, and I'm not saying this hasn't happened already, but all it takes, unfortunately, is for that one particular kid who does have parents or someone in their life or someone who wants to step up that's smart to know that this organization is to blame for some of this being, or liable, let's just say liable for this person being dead or killing another rival because they put money behind this diss record that clearly talked about beefs that are like active and real and not just rap lyrics, right? So I agree for both reasons. Overrated. It's not worth your time, shorty. There's another way you can get hot. It's about to be over. It is what it is. And lastly, now, last episode, I gave you what I thought about Billboard's top 50 greatest rappers of all time. Ran down the criteria, talked about how that criteria applied. Since then, a couple people have felt snubbed, right? Like Ja Rule and a couple of people, right? And some people say, well, why would he be on the list? But it's Billboard, and charting was a part of it. So Ja Rule should be there probably in the same vein as Rick Ross, if not in front of him. But whatever the case may be, I talked about that list. Well, now we have another list, but this list is a little bit more interesting. It's from Rolling Stones. I know. But let's see what happens in real time. Rolling Stone's 50 genuinely horrible albums by brilliant artists. So we're going to look at this list. We're going to look, okay? Because, oh man, I'm already seeing things. Now, what I want to do is to start right at the end and just look for hip hop, right? In real time. This is what we're doing, y'all. I don't know what's on this list. I didn't review it beforehand because I just wanted to check it out. So we're scrolling through 50 through 41. And when I come across hip hop, I will say something and boom, we're here. 2006, Idlewild by Outkast at number 46. Let's just read the opening passage for this. The soundtrack to Outkast's Depression-era movie Idlewild generated pretty strong reviews when it came out in 2006, but that's probably because critics couldn't even conceive of a subpar album by the Atlanta duo after their incredible streak from 1994's Southern Playalistic Cadillac Music to 2003 Speakerboxx The Love Below. I'm going to tell y'all like this. I do not agree. I think, we talking about hip hop. We ain't talking about Rolling Stones and what they feel, right? Of course they feel like, oh, Outkast, all their joints is crazy. Stop it, right? Stop it. They're right about that run. I don't think Idlewild was whack. I think, even though it was critically acclaimed, I think most Outkast fans who've been fans since 94, right, felt some kind of way after Speakerboxx Love Below. Love Below in particular. For some people, they didn't like it. Now, I liked it. I liked the double album. I liked the contrast between the two. Sure, I wanted more Andre Rahman, but after a while, I was like, who cares? This whole thing is dope. I love Idlewild. I just love the vibe. Now the movie, that wasn't great, but the soundtrack, the music, it was what Outkast had done over time as far as the sound, as far as the whole juke joint feel kind of. I loved it, but I think the problem is that it probably should have happened before Speakerboxx The Love Below, because I think with Stankonia and Aquemini and AT-Aliens, that was kind of like a revolving door for Outkast, right? Creativity, little looks here and there vibe. But Speakerboxx and Love Below felt like they arrived as superstars. Not rap superstars, just superstars. So in one sense, I can agree. Maybe this feels like a step down from that presence and feels more in line with Bombs Over Baghdad and stuff like that. But I think it's stupid to say that because, again, with this album, it wasn't terrible and it wasn't like it was unlike Outkast. But I think, because the Rolling Stones, I think it wasn't Speakerboxx Love Below to them, right? And I get it, I just kind of feel like the production was fine, the lyrics were fine, the harmonies were fine. I found myself walking away from several tracks on that soundtrack, loving it, and I never really looked at it as this Outkast album, even though it was a soundtrack. But in a lot of ways, if it's a soundtrack, well, I mean, it should be different. I just read the description. So that's my take on it. I don't think this album was horrible. Let's see what else is in the top 50. Or, depending on the time, we may be able to just go through the list and just point out the hip hop. Okay, let's keep the time going. And then when I reach hip hop, which I'm scrolling, y'all, just give me a chance. I'm scrolling. I'm at 38. Wow, there's a Prince album on here, Chaos and Disorder. I've never heard of that. So, yeah, I think there's a good reason why it is there. I'm at 34. I think we're going to go through the whole list looking for hip hop. There's one album in particular that I do know is on this list because it's the reason why I chose this story. Now, at number 27, Run DMC, a 2001 album. Rest in peace, Jim Master Jay. He was still alive and is on the cover. It was a return of Run DMC. You know, back when they had the bald heads, that was gone. That album was trash. We all knew it. But then they came back for the album called Crown Royal. Here's I think I clicked on it and messed things up. Lord have mercy. Let's scroll back. All right, here we go. Here's a quick description. Run DMC are undoubtedly one of the most important groups in rap history, and their 4 80s albums are practically flawless. But the hip-hop world underwent systemic changes in the 90s thanks to Public Enemy, NWA, Jay-Z, and Eminem. Wow. And Run DMC seemed like relics from a distant past, despite records like 1990's Back from Hell, 1993's Down with the King, which was trash, where they did their best to keep up with the trends. I'm going to tell y'all like this. They ain't lying. Crown Royal was garbage. I remember in 2001, when this album was coming out, I was in a barbershop in B-More. I was hosting Strictly Hip Hop around that time. And I remember this one dude, one old head. I knew he was from the 80s. I knew he was from the 80s. Just by the way he even mentioned it. He was like, yo, Run DMC got a new album coming out called Crown Royal. And I'm thinking like, no one is anticipating that, my friend. Get your hair cut and shut up. But hip hop head, lifelong fan of Run DMC, one of the greatest groups of all time, if not the greatest hip hop group of all time. Don't call it a duo, fan. Who cares if it's two? It's a group. But nevertheless, this album's garbage. I tried to listen to it. I think there was one record. I looked for one record. I was like, I just need one record that I could play just to salute Run DMC. And I may have found that record, and I may have felt like I was pushing it, putting that on the airwaves. But this album just was not good, y'all. It was sort of a disappointment considering they were back and they had the hats, the fedoras on, and they had the leather, and it was back. And it was like Crown Royal, DMC on the cover. Like, I was hyped. I thought this was it. But what the problem with this album was the same problem with Down with the King. Run DMC were looking at the musical landscape and saying what's hot and who's hot, and let's work with them. And let's create a sound today with them. And they got away from Run DMC, hip hop, what we like, right? We didn't want Walk This Way 20 times. We didn't want Walk This Way with Kid Rock. We wanted Run DMC. What is Run DMC in 2001? They should be no different. The cover suggested they were no different. They were returning to Tougher Than Leather, Back in Leather, or whatever the name of that joint was. Back from Hell, something like that. But again, not to just constantly troll, but Rolling Stones got this right. They got it right because the album was not great. Number 24, Lil Wayne, Rebirth, 2010. I'm going to tell you like this. Well, let me read it to you since you don't know, because some people are like, what album is that? That's the Carter? Like, no, Rebirth. Lil Wayne is a hip-hop genius, but he learned the hard way with 2010's Rebirth that his skills did not transfer over to the world of rock and roll. He was coming off a long winning streak with 3 consecutive The Carter albums and had been all over top 40 radio with hits like Lollipop and Got Money. That didn't mean, however, that his fans wanted to hear what he'd sound like paired with rock guitars and drums, even if Eminem and Nicki Minaj were along for the ride. I can't really speak on this album because I've never heard it in its entirety, but from what I did hear, I was like, this is garbage. Wake me up when you got another Carter. Everything they said here is true facts. It's the truth. They got this one right. Idlewild, no. But this one, and Crown Royal, Run DMC, yes, this is correct. Both of these albums are trash. I'm just going to say it like that. Both of them are trash. Now, I will say this, because this was going to be a topic last week on this podcast, but they just kind of teed it up for me. Lil Yachty did the same thing recently, where he decided, you know what, I like rock, and I'm going to put out a rock album. And guess what, y'all? I actually like it. And I don't mean that as, oh, it's not bad. Back to my other stuff. No, like, I like it. Like, a lot. Like, yeah. Now, this is Hip Hop Now podcast, not Rock and Roll podcast. Not Rock and Roll Now podcast, even though I should come out with that. But I just feel like with Yachty's attempt, he knows his limits, but he knows enough about the genre to make something that sounds good. And I've never liked Yachty as a rapper. He is trash as a rapper. But this rock album is dope. And one of the things I thought about was Lil Wayne's Rebirth and how that was a failed attempt for him to just say, oh, I'm a rock star. Takes more than dressing like a rock star to actually be one. Stick to rapping, fam. Just don't even do us like that. So let's see. We're in the 20s now. We're almost done. Just hold on. Oh, Queen is on this list. Damn. Not Queen Bee or nothing like that. You know what I mean? The group. David Bowie's on here. Wow. We had 17, 16, 50. The Jacksons. Oh, 2300 Jackson Street. That is the only thing I remember about that. Elton John's on this list. Wow. Van Morrison. Okay. Now we're reaching the top 10, and I believe there is hip hop in the top 10. One in particular. If you saw this list, you probably from the future, and you already know what to do. Okay. Top Black Sabbath is on here. Oh, Bob Dylan at number 5. Okay. Who else? We get into the top 3, top 2, and number 1. Wow. At number 1 on this list. Now, one thing, hip hop fans, Nostradamus isn't on this list, which is probably universally considered Nas's worst album. But honestly, like I always say, the beats and hooks are whack, but his bars are on point. So, but they're number 1 for a horrible album. Genuinely horrible album by a brilliant artist. It's Kanye West's album from 2018 called Yay. This is the one where he took a picture of the mountains and then he kind of like, I guess on his Samsung phone wrote, I hate being bipolar. It's awesome. Goosh. Let's read a little bit about this album. Here we go. The past 5 years of Kanye West's life have been so unbelievably sad and self-destructive, culminating with a horrifying series of interviews in late 2022 where he praised Hitler, defended Nazis, that his recent albums have almost been an afterthought to most people. Well, this is true. Let me see what else. Okay, we're just going to get into what I feel about it. So I don't know if you heard 2018 Yay album. This is after he had the Make America Great hat on. He met with Donald Trump and slavery was a choice. And we all said to ourselves, this man is crazy, right? It's not crazy. He's just mentally ill. That's just what it is. And that's not a euphemism for crazy. It's just what it is. You see it on display. Just because he's rich doesn't mean it doesn't happen to rich people. Put it that way. Or wealthy, whatever. But this Yay album, which was one in the series of, remember when Kanye was dropping those EPs, one with Pusha T's Daytona. Who else dropped one? Now I'm blanking on Nas, right? This was him and Kid Cudi, right? This was Ye's time as a soloist. I have this album. I reviewed it at the time, and my thoughts still stand. I think lyrically, it is hot garbage. It is a stage podium to stand upon, whether he's standing on the stage in front of a podium or standing on top of the podium. It was a self-indulgent soapbox album, just lyrically, just to say what he felt. And it was garbage. Musically, it's better than number one on this kind of list. Musically, I was like, well, I didn't meet a beat I didn't like on that album. That is for sure. But he ruins it with his ideologies and what he has to say. And being bipolar comes out in the lyrics on this album. So, should he be number one on this list? I don't think so. Should he be on this list? Yeah, but I don't know if it's for this album. But it probably is his worst lyrically, because even with the Donda albums, I felt like with those, he's in the pocket with the lyrics, even if you don't agree with every single thing being said or it's going on for too long. It felt more like the Kanye, whereas this one kind of felt like he was just making statements with no rhyme or reason, no flow, no nothing really. So it is kind of horrible in a lot of ways. That's going to do it for me. You can follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at VegasWorldINC. And check out, subscribe, like, and comment to this podcast on YouTube by just, hitting that subscribe and like button and leaving a comment. I'm saying that's how it goes. You see it scrolling towards the bottom. But also know this podcast is available wherever you get your podcast in audio form, whether that's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, and more. All you got to do is search for the words Hip Hop Now Podcast, hit subscribe, and stay locked into weekly hip hop content. Until next time, y'all, I am not a critic. I'm a fan. Peace.